So you don't forget. And sometimes people just lost the recording. That's just me.
Yeah. Just tell me when you think we should start.
Anytime you like to, Ward.
Okay. So I guess I'll start with introductions. My name is Ward Andrews. I work for CTS. I'm one of our information security technicians. And this talk will be on phishing, specifically how to spot, report it. I'm going to be covering a few different subjects, defining what phishing is, along with covering various phishing methodologies we've seen over the last year. So with that said, I'll just dive in. So I'll start with what a phishing message is. Typically, when we talk about phishing, we talk about email because that's a primary vector for phishing messages to reach us. But I'm going to be referring to them as phishing messages and not just phishing emails, because phishing really is just a deceptive act to engage in communication with someone for malicious intent. So phishing can involve all sorts of different contact methodologies. So really to start with it, they are malicious messages designed to look like someone or something you know. A good example of this would be a friend asking for money or a business needing information about you. So really what it is just a deceptive communication. Oftentimes also, phishing will involve feelings of urgency in you or a potential threat. So an example of this would be a threat to take legal action against you or create the feeling that you must act quickly to gain or prevent something. Good example of this would be a phishing message saying that if you don't contact this number in 2 hours, we're going to erase all the data on your computer. Or in terms of that you might gain something, you have to wire a certain amount of money over to us within the next day, because if you do, we'll send you $100,000. So by creating that sense of urgency, it is designed to kind of disrupt rational thought process and quicken your response to fall into something and throw common sense to the wayside. So with that just general primer on what phishing is, I wanted to cover the common phishing methods that we've seen over the last calendar year. Because when it comes to phishing methods, they change constantly. Because typically as word gets out about phishing and the methods being used currently, they become less effective because people become more aware of how it's being done. So as a result, malicious actors alter how they're doing it to continue deceiving people efficiently. So the number one type of phishing method that we've seen over the last year are employment scams. So employment scams are typically designed to trick someone into thinking that there's a job opportunity waiting for them. And there'll be a long string of correspondence, typically from an email address that looks similar to one that you might know or trust. A good example might be, I'll use myself for example, Ward Andrews. I'm affiliated with Oswego, so you'd assume that if I'm talking to you, I work for SUNY Oswego. But if you examine the email address itself, it wouldn't be an oswego.edu email address. It would be a gmail.com address that's using my name and likeness to make you think I'm a legitimate entity offering you employment. Typically, these job scams will go back and forth until they ask you to buy something for the job you've allegedly been hired for. And then following that, you'll send them money to reimburse them for those costs, and they'll promise to reimburse you, and then they'll disappear. These types of scams have primarily targeted the student body, not so much our employee groups. So with these, we've been working really hard with some of our tools to prevent people from accessing them and engaging in awareness campaigns. But employment scams really have been the number one over the last year. One that's been a little more recent and has been sliding into this current year are PayPal money requests. So this method is utilized by leveraging PayPal's legitimate services to send phishing emails. So these emails actually do come from PayPal. They're real PayPal emails. We've also seen this with Venmo. The biggest indicator with these is that they're money requests. So through PayPal or Venmo, you can request money from anyone, but they're structured to look like a bill or an invoice. So it might say, you owe us $2,000. If this isn't legitimate, call this number to dispute it. And what they're trying to get you to do by creating that sense of urgency is call that number. And that number is not affiliated with PayPal. It's not affiliated with anybody. Because again, this is a financial crime. They're trying to trick you into sending them money or giving them remote access to your computer to maybe do something because, well, we just have to check this because maybe this wasn't you, but we have to verify. So that's been a real common one. Google Drive phishing, another good example of using a legitimate service to engage in malicious conduct. When you share a Google Drive link with someone, those links come from Google Drive. They come from a Google email address. But similar to PayPal money requests, you can share things with pretty much anybody. So what they'll do is they'll structure a legitimate looking document and they might sign it from someone of importance at the university and say, hey, I just need you to open this and take a look at it. Or it's a Google form through Drive that says, hey, fill this out, please. We're doing something with the information technology systems. And oftentimes what those are used for is collecting information or collecting user credentials to gain access to our systems. So again, these are tricky because they come from legitimate services. So with those, again, you have to really think about why am I getting something like this? Because now that they're leveraging legitimate services, it becomes harder to say, well, so the sender was real, but is what I'm being sent real? Remote access scareware. So these are scareware. I'll give a quick definition of that too, is when you're browsing the internet and then all of a sudden something pops up on your screen. It's Microsoft. They say that there's a horrible virus on your computer. And if you need to call this number because we need to remediate this, otherwise the urgency thing again, all of your data will end up deleted in 3 hours if we don't do something about this. Now, this kind of goes back to phishing isn't always email. This is ultimately utilizing a pop-up to phish you into thinking that it's a legitimate number to call. So you call this number, and then they'll ask for remote access to your computer. Oftentimes, this is a financial crime. They're going to do something to try to get you to pay them for their services, when in reality, it's just an extortion method. But sometimes this can be more nefarious. Sometimes they might gain remote access. They might have you install something. What they install might be a malicious file, a malicious program that's used to maintain remote access and get access to other systems within the university. So in those cases, we've got these people reaching out pretty much at random, just hoping you'll call these numbers. And the final one is gift card scams. And you've probably heard about these. They've been on the news. You've probably seen signs at the grocery store, but very frequently, someone will contact your email we've had them contact through SMS text messaging saying, hey, this is the president of SUNY Oswego. I need you to run out and buy $5,000 worth of gift cards because I need them to, clear up a PO that's out there. And this has been constant for the last couple of years. Anyone contacts you and says that they need you to buy them a large volume of gift cards, it's a scam. So, but those are really the ones that we've been seeing really commonly over the last year. So with that out of the way, how do you spot these? Because if you're like me, you get a lot of mail every day, because I get a lot of mail, and you review things, you go through things kind of quick. How do you see these quickly, without having to apply a ton of scrutiny? So the first thing you can do if it's an email related situation is check the sender address. Oftentimes what people who are conducting phishing scams will do is they'll spoof the sender in the email to look like it came from someone legitimate or a legitimate department. So since we're doing a CELT workshop, I'll use CELT as an example. You get an email and it says that it's from CELT and that they need something from you. I'll use gift cards. They need gift cards to cover something because there was just some last minute expense and they need you to buy that. What you can do in your email client is, it says it's from CELT, but go in and check the sender address. Did it actually come from a cell email address? Because if you go a little deeper and you check those sender addresses, you might see that it's coming from, celt@proton.xyz. That's not a SUNY Oswego email address. So in that case, that would be a phish. So the first thing you should do if you have any reasonable suspicion that something is phishing is check those sender addresses, because that's going to be one of the first dead giveaways. Those can be spoofed, but oftentimes aren't, because it's a little more of a technical job to do that. And a lot of the time when people are doing this, they're not necessarily targeting people. A targeted phish is something called a spear phish, which is much more elaborate, which these steps can also help address. But oftentimes it's just a large email blast. So they're just hoping that you're not checking. Scrutinize spam folder messages. This is another big one. So a lot of email systems, we use Google Mail, for example, utilize algorithms to determine if something is spam, if it's phishing, or if it's just unwanted communication. So they'll oftentimes put those things in your spam folder. Most of the time, everything in your spam folder is not something you should engage with. Sometimes in rare cases, it might be a legitimate message, but oftentimes you really shouldn't be engaging or corresponding with things in your spam folder unless you can really verify who you're talking to is who you're talking to. So again, check those sender addresses and apply the rest of the tips that I'm going to work through to messages there if you're trying to determine if something in your spam folder is legitimate. But I would say 90% of the time, 95% of the time, what's in your spam folder is not legitimate. That's why it's easy to clear, because most of the time you don't want to. Look for mistakes. If you're familiar with phishing, this is a really common one that gets hammered in a lot, and it's worth reiterating because it's common. It's becoming a little less common with generative AI, but AI also makes mistakes. The big ones to check for are spelling and grammatical errors. These are the ones that AI have been somewhat addressing because you can just utilize something like ChatGPT to smooth over grammatical and spelling errors, but they're still present. What I often say is also look for awkward use of language. So something that's formatted kind of strangely, or if it reads unusually, scrutinize it. But if you see these, they're almost always phishing emails. So those are the ones that you really want to ignore, report, etc. And another big one is incorrect affiliations. So this is something that I don't think people quite think about as much, but it's an important thing to look for if you're trying to spot these, which is, I work for CTS, Campus Technology Service. So sometimes we abbreviate, sometimes we write the whole thing out. If you were to receive an email and it said Computer Technology Service, that would be a situation where that's an incorrect affiliation. It's close, but that's not what our department's called. And it's very unlikely that someone who works for a department would send an email like that. So sometimes they'll be way off the mark, but sometimes they'll be really, really close, because maybe the person who formatted the email took a guess at what CTS meant and they were close, but it's designed that way to trick you. Asking for sensitive information. So this is a big one. The one that we tell, you've probably seen all over the places, don't tell anyone your password. No one's ever going to ask you for your password. And that is very true. No one's going to ask for your password. No one's going to ask you for MFA codes. No one's going to ask for that. So if you encounter a Google form, if you encounter an email, a text message, a phone call, never share that information. Treat that information like a credit card number. Treat it like your social security number. It is private information that is only for you. No one would ever need to use it or verify it. In IT, we can't see your passwords, we can't see your MFA codes, and we have no reason to. Another one is personally identifying information, or PII for short. So PII is, as it sounds, personally identifying information, such as social security numbers, date of birth, things that could be used in an effort to trick others into thinking they're used, things that could lead to identity theft. Employee ID numbers. There are different definitions for PI in terms of legal definitions and really what you should keep safe. I tend to lean on the side of caution and go even farther than the legal definitions. So as I said, your SUNY numbers, your address, anything that can identify who you are, because typically forms that are collecting that, going back to the Google Drive scams, oftentimes there's just a big spreadsheet saying, just fill this out. And then you fill it out and then they have all this information on you and they can use that to impersonate you or worse. And question urgency, always question urgency. It's very rare that something is going to be available for a limited time, especially if it's an offer that's either too good to be true or if it's threatening. You know, and it's oftentimes the timeframes are really short. You have a couple hours, you only have one day. If you're on the phone with someone, sometimes like you have to do this now or we're gonna corrupt your computer. Very often, that's just to overwhelm you. It's just to overwhelm your, you know, as I said prior, your common sense, your danger sense. It's just overwhelmed because you're too, at that point, nervous, anxious, confused, and you just give in to what they're asking you to do. So if someone's really pressing you hard on something like this, hang up, delete the email, stop talking to them, because it's very often a scam. So now that we've covered how to spot phishing, how do you respond to it? So let's say you've found something and you're pretty sure, okay, I think this is a phish. I'm not sure. How do I verify it and what do I do to confirm it? So the first thing I would do if you think you have a phish is do not interact with that message, regardless of how you got it. Don't click any links in an email. Don't click any links on a pop-up that appeared saying, click here to resolve your problems. Don't open any attachments if it's an email. Don't open attachments if it's attached to an SMS message. Those could potentially be malicious files, malicious programs that could wreak havoc on your systems. Or it could be a form used to mine information off of you. Don't respond to the sender. Don't engage them, because once you engage them, they'll probably keep engaging you even if you try to break off, which you can block that, but it just makes your life difficult for a little bit of time. Don't call or text provided numbers, because oftentimes if there's a number provided, it's just a way to get you on the phone and then apply those prior tactics where you gain, you know, you pull information, people try to remote into your computer, they try to press you for urgency. Just do not respond in any way, shape, or form to those messages. Once you have something that you believe is a phishing email, it's important to verify the information in it if you're on the fence. If it looks somewhat legitimate, but you're not sure because it follows some of those methods listed, you need to try to figure out if it's legitimate. And to do that, you have to use trusted methods. When I say trusted methods, it means, let's say you get something from the CTS help desk. It looks a little off. Maybe the sender address isn't right. Maybe it's worded awkwardly, and maybe it's asking for information that it shouldn't. You need to use a trusted method to figure out if the help desk actually sent that. So an example of that would be if you were on campus and you used a campus phone and dialed 3456, that's our extension on campus. That will never lead you anywhere else. That's a trusted method because you know that's calling our help desk in Lanigan Hall. So then you can ask, hey, is this legitimate? And we're going to tell you no. So that's a way of doing it. And that applies outside of that too. For example, a PayPal customer service email that says, call this to dispute with PayPal. Don't call the number in the email. Go to PayPal's legitimate website and look up their customer service number. Chances are you'll find it's a different number. And if you call that, they'll tell you it's a phishing scam. So always use that information you know leads to the person or entity that you're trying to contact. And if you're still not sure, or if you're positive that it's a phishing message, forward it to our CTS help desk. Because by forwarding it to us, we have a series of tools that we use to help block some of these things, help improve our algorithms, help direct these to the spam folders. So when we get these, not only can we verify if it's authentic or inauthentic, we can also use it to fine tune our tools to make our environment a little bit safer. And the other thing that you can do within the Google Mail environment is you probably marked messages as spam before. If you go a little deeper, I don't have pictures with me, unfortunately, but there's a series of 3 buttons near that overlay. You can also, if you click that, there's an option for mark phishing. You can directly mark something as phishing, which applies a little more weight to it to help block it or direct it to spam folders. And brief presentation, but that kind of brings us to the end. I know I would leave it open for questions, but I feel like most people watching this are probably doing a recording. But if you do have questions, I would say you can reach out to our help desk. As I said, my name is Ward. I'd be happy to answer them for you. We have a small security team, but I'm sure that the other members of that group would be happy to answer those as well for you.
That was great, Ward. Thank you very much. I'm just going to stop the recording.
Yep.
Nice to meet you again.
Yeah, nice to meet you again
Appreciate
too.
it very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
We'll be posting that too, in case people wanted to get to it. It's easy enough for them to get to it.